In today's tutorial, we are going to draw this cute cat illustration together, using a fun, playful coloring style inspired by children's book illustrations. Just like in most of my tutorials, you can download the line art and color palette directly from the video description below, so feel free to follow along with the exact same setup. Alright, let's get started. This sketch comes from one of my membership tutorials, where I spent over 2 hours guiding my students through 5 animal portraits, step by step. Let's take the same line art and use a new coloring style to see how it changes the overall feel. First, let's set up the layers. Take your sketch layer and change the blend mode to multiply, then lower the opacity to around 10%. This softens the lines so they won't get in the way while coloring, but you will still able to see where to paint. Next, create a new layer underneath the line art. This will be our base coloring layer. In my case, it's showing up as layer 3. For the brush, I am using the favorite chalk brush from my flat color brush set. If you don't have access to that, you can use any brushes from Procreate's default sketching brushes. Let's start by blocking in the main color of the cat's face. It's the first color on the first row of the color palette I provided. Before you begin laying down the base colors, make sure to turn on the drawing guide, because this cat's face is symmetrical and we want to speed things up with symmetry turned on. To do that, go to the wrench icon in the top left, tap Canvas, and turn on Drawing Guide. Then tap Edit Drawing Guide, switch to Symmetry, and you'll want to move the symmetry line so it aligns with the center of the cat's face. Once that's set, tap the new coloring layer, which is layer 3, and turn on the drawing assist. Now everything you draw on one side will be mirrored on the other. After the main color is in, create a new layer, layer 4, and use the second color on the first row of the palette to paint the lighter lower half of the cat's face. Next, we will start drawing the facial features on separate layers. I like to keep each element, like the nose, the little area under the nose, like the mustache, the eyes, and even the pupils on their own individual layers. This gives you more control and makes it easier to adjust details later on. Since the face is symmetrical, don't forget to turn on Drawing Assist for each new layer, so that all the features you draw stay mirrored. Just tap the layer and enable Drawing Assist before you start painting. If you are enjoying this tutorial and want to go deeper, inside of my drawing membership, you will find real-time, fully narrated, step-by-step demos, plus guided practice to help you build real skills and confidence. You don't need talent, you just need a plan. Come draw with me inside of the membership. Once all the features are done, I go back to layer 3, the one with the base color of the face, and add a new layer above it, which in my case is layer 9. On this new layer, I draw the markings on the cat's face, like the stripes and the little eyebrow-like dots. To make things easier, I set this layer 9 as a clipping mask to layer 3. That way all the markings stay perfectly within the face shape and you don't have to worry about coloring outside of the edges. Now we are going to add some elements that sit behind the cat's face, like the ears, the collar, and a few decorative details in the background. Since these parts are further back in the visual space, for example, the ears are behind the head, the collar sits beneath the face, it's important to place the layers for these elements on sort of lower layers. So I created new layers underneath layer 3, which is the base face layer, and started drawing the ears, the collar, and those little background decorations. Now, if I turn off the line art, you can see how the illustration looks so far. Each color block is clear and neatly separated, and every element is on its own layer. The key to clean flat coloring is really just this: keep your edges sharp and make sure the layer order reflects the spatial order. Whatever is visually in front should be placed on a higher layer. Alright, the final elements we are adding go on top of all the other layers. And with that, all the flat colors are done. Next, we will add some lighting and shading to bring more color variation and depth to the illustration. By the way, I like to keep a copy of each step as I go, so at this point, I selected all the flat color layers and grouped them together. I named this group base colors. Then I duplicated that group. For the original, I merged all the layers inside to save space, since Procreate has a layer limit. This helps keeping things manageable. Then for the duplicated group, that's where we will start the next step. Inside of this group, I alpha locked each layer so we can add texture and shading without painting outside of the shapes. To do this, you can tap each layer and choose alpha lock, or just swipe right with 2 fingers on the layer to quickly lock the transparency. For this step, adding shadow, or you can also say adding texture, I'm using the textured pastel brush from my Texture Brushes brush set. If you don't have that, you can get a similar effect using Procreate's default brush like Nickel Roll. My lighting setup here is pretty simple. I imagined the light coming from below, hitting the cat's face from the bottom. So areas closer to the ground will appear slightly brighter, while parts further away, like the top of the head, will be a bit darker. When I shade, I like to start with the largest color blocks first, so I begin with layer 3, which is the main face layer. Since we already alpha locked it, we can paint directly on this layer without worrying about going outside of the edges. I added some darker tones near the cherry on top of the head, since that area is quite far from the light source. And near the bottom of the face, closer to the ground, I added some lighter tones. I followed the same approach for layer 4, which also covers a large area of the cat's face, using that same lighting logic to add depth and color variation. After that, I continued adding shading and color variation to the smaller elements in the illustration, using the same lighting logic. This helps break up the flat colors, though each area has more depth and interest. Instead of looking like a single block of color, each shape now has highlights and shadows, making it feel like light is actually hitting the object, the cat. It also adds richness to the overall color palette. Also, many of these layers still have drawing assist turned on. You can keep it on while shading if the symmetry works for you, or turn it off if you want the line to be a bit more natural and asymmetrical. Now let's take a look at the before and after. Step 1 with just flat colors, and step 2 with the added shading and color variation. The difference is actually quite big. Now we're ready for step 3, final details. You can also say adding final touches. First, create a new layer at the very top of your layer stack and name this layer Final Details or Final Touches, whichever you prefer. This layer is used to deepen the colors and enhance the shadows across the entire illustration. To do that, set the blend mode of this layer to multiply. On this new layer, we will darken certain areas, mostly along the outer edges, and cast shadows. For example, where the head touches the collar, you can add a shadow to show that the head is casting light downward. You can also darken areas around the eyes, the edges of the nose, or the cherry sitting on top of the head, since it will naturally cast a small shadow onto the cat's face. The idea is to reinforce form and depth, especially where objects overlap or meet. As for choosing your colors on this layer, just pick the existing color from the area you want to darken. Since the layer is already set to multiply, Procreate will automatically deepen the color for you, so you don't need to choose a darker shade manually. After adding those deeper shadows, we will create one final layer at the very top, also named Final Details. This time we will leave the blend mode as normal because we are going to add highlights. Think small bright touches like highlights on the eyes, a little shine on the cherry, a glow on the blush, or a few brighter accents on the color. These tiny details really help bring the whole piece to life. And with that, this illustration is complete. If you compare it to the coloring style I used in my membership tutorial, you'll see quite a big difference. This version uses a much softer textured approach, while the class version is more line-focused. But both styles started from the same sketch, which was based on a reference photo and turned into line art before being colored. So really, the most important part is the initial sketching process. That's where the creativity starts. If you're interested in learning how to sketch from reference and then turn the sketch to colored illustrations, don't forget to check out the link to my Join membership. There's an early bird discount running right now, so it's a great time to join. Thank you for hanging out with me today. I will see you in my next tutorial. Bye!